Hi, I'm Mark Briggs, CEO and founder of Validity. Welcome to our first ever Email Summit event. Thank you for joining us today to not only celebrate the launch of our new email solution, Everest, but to also recognize and salute the marketing power of email as a whole. Now more than ever, email continues to be the most effective marketing channel and the only one used by just about everyone everywhere. It's a cornerstone of digital interaction and commerce, from promotions to purchase confirmations. And email is how critical information is distributed. Email isn't going anywhere. In fact, its transformation from simple correspondence to critical communication has highlighted just how complex email has become and how hard it can be for a business to get the most out of it as a channel to engage with customers. That's why we created Everest. Developed by the same teams that built ReturnPath, 250OK, and Bright Verify, Everest is the only email success platform that allows you to optimize your campaigns pre-send, in-flight, and post-send all in one place. I'm excited about Everest, and I'm really excited about the future of email. Thanks again for coming, and enjoy the event.
Welcome to this summit, a special event showcasing Everest, the email marketing platform that is now revolutionizing the industry, and some of the people using it to improve their email performance. I'm Laura Christensen, Director of Professional Services here at Validity. We have a fantastic agenda for you today, packed full of sessions to both educate and inspire. You'll see the agenda on the side of your screen. We'll start off with a discussion on the future of deliverability, talking with guests from AstraZeneca and Booking.com about their strategies to make sure their emails get to their subscribers' inboxes. Next, we'll talk with experts from Verizon Media, Pinterest, and TCF National Bank about the email industry innovations that they're predicting as more and more senders push to reach peak email performance. Finally, we'll wrap things up with our keynote speaker, Ed Viesters, who will share his own experiences making it to the top and reaching the peak. Here's a quick preview of what Ed has in store for us.
People think that what I do is dangerous. Well, driving a car every day is dangerous, and you can't live your life risk-free. For me in the mountains, that's this arena that I've discovered where I can really test myself. And I don't seek the death, I don't seek the risk. I know it could happen, but I just don't even think about it. It's extremely satisfying when you get to the top. The first feeling that you have is this moment of relief, knowing that you don't have to go up anymore. You get to start going down. But it's this very satisfying, rewarding moment.
Phenomenal. We can't wait to hear more from Ed later. Throughout this event, you'll see on the side of your screen an interactive sidebar. So you can use it to follow along with the agenda, to answer interactive poll questions, and to learn more about our speakers today. But before we get to our first panel discussion, let's give you a quick introduction to our email success platform, Everest, which serves as the inspiration for today's event.
There's never been a platform in the world that allows you to analyze, optimize, and enhance the effectiveness of your email programs in one place. There is now. Welcome to Everest, a platform that helps you optimize 3 critical phases of email marketing: pre-send prep, in-flight optimization, and post-send monitoring, only with Everest. Join us today as we go on a tour of Everest. You'll see how the platform benefits you in each of those phases and what new features we've added in comparison to our previous products.
Before you hit send, ensuring your email campaign is in the best shape possible is crucial to its chances of success. Everest gives you that peace of mind through its list validation, design and content tools, and competitive intel. With list validation, you can verify the addresses on your list aren't dead, wrong, or dangerous before mailing them, and protect your sender reputation. With thousands of device and email reader combinations, how do you know your message will look its best? Everest's state-of-the-art design and content tools enable you to collaborate, design, code, and test your email before you mail subscribers. Finally, Everest gives you an edge with its comprehensive competitive intel. Get visibility into what competitors are doing well, including message samples, subject lines, creative inspiration, and best practices.
On to our first session, focused on email deliverability. Moderating our panel sessions today is Guy Hansen. Guy is Validity's VP of Customer Engagement. Guy has an email and data knowledge base spanning 20 years. And over the past decade, Guy led ReturnPath's global consulting team and worked with world-famous clients across 6 continents to improve their email delivery, subscriber engagement, and revenue. We are so glad you could join us today, Guy.
Laura, thank you so much. And a real pleasure to be here today. What a great event. So, from an email perspective, it's possibly going to be the wildest, craziest, most manic holiday season we've ever seen. Deliverability is going to get a load harder. Delivery times are going to take longer. And subscriber engagement is going to be under big downward pressure. So what strategies should email senders be adopting to make sure their programs remain effective during such a busy time? And what role do Validity solutions play to help? So to answer those questions, I've got 2 fantastic panelists joining me. Firstly, welcome to Sjoerd Engelblik, Product Manager for Marketing Messaging Infrastructure at Booking.com. Sjoerd has 9 years of experience developing and implementing email software. He manages the back-end solution, handling the generation and the delivery of hundreds of millions of emails for Booking.com every week, and optimizes the email deliverability and reputation for these emails. Sjoerd, great to have you with us. Also joining us on the panel, we have Craig Hood, Channel Excellence Lead for Email, SMS, and Mobile Wallet at AstraZeneca. Craig has been working in the pharmaceutical and financial industries for more than 35 years, with 10 years at AstraZeneca, performing digital project management in the email CRM execution space. His role spans US and global markets, working with more than 20 different pharmaceutical brands around the world. Craig, great to have you with us too.
Thank you.
So I'm going to kick off with a poll question for the 2 of you. When it comes to the role that deliverability plays in your lives, what's the one thing that keeps you guys awake at night? Craig, maybe you first.
Sure. I think it's the fear of the unknown. And the idea that I work with 20 plus markets, I can't guarantee that each market sends out good content. So a lot of the best practices we've implemented always becomes a challenge, and it's really hard for me to guarantee that it's going to work right. So that's probably the best. I mean, Spain market alone doesn't have has multiple languages that they send the emails out in, and it's really hard for me to know which one's going to work, which one's not.
Yeah, that's a lot of pulses to keep your thumb on. And Sjoerd, what about you? What makes you wake up sweating in the middle of the night?
Luckily, not that much. But in this case, spam house listings, we've had some bad experiences with that over the past, 2 years, really. Luckily, we haven't had much this year, but yeah, they're quite hard to deal with.
You know the pain of a bad listing.
I do.
So this has been a remarkable year. I think we all know what's been going on with the COVID-19 pandemic, but I think it's created some particular deliverability challenges for senders. So, Craig, back to you for a moment. You know, how's the pandemic made your deliverability life harder this year?
Well, in the pharma industry, we definitely have two sets of customers. We have the actual customers who could potentially be on our medications, but there's also the healthcare professionals. And we treat the healthcare professionals in a little bit different than normal in that we have a business-to-business relationship with them. And that allows us to communicate important medicational information changes in addition to just the normal promotional of medicines. The biggest challenge has been now that things are kind of shut down or has been shut down, and the HCPs are not able to be seen by sales reps. So there's a whole additional email sends from sales reps in addition to adding more digital channel efforts associated to, you know, communicating to them. I think that the biggest thing that I see is the norm is not normal anymore. And ultimately, we have to come up with a better omni-channel approach to where we're communicating to the HCP or the consumer in multiple different ways and still giving the same type of message, providing the next best message in that.
So almost divergent challenges from two fairly different audiences, but you know, it sounds like some of those challenges are actually having a good outcome for you as email plays a more central role in your businesses. Sjoerd, a tough year in the travel sector for sure. How's it impacted your program?
Well, the first couple of months from a deliverability perspective were fairly easy because we stopped most of our mass sends from a marketing perspective. It didn't make that much sense to start promoting international travel or even local travel at some points. When we started ramping up again, that's basically where you, from a deliverability perspective, have a very big pool of very cold IPs. So we had to think careful on how fast we could go, how fast we could ramp up these IPs. We couldn't start with millions of emails per IP per day. That was, well, we expected that would go wrong. So we prepared a lot of dashboards, seeing if we hit rate limits when we started ramping up again. Worked with different models from talk to Validity, talk to other vendors as well that we have good relations with to make sure that we get all the advice that we have. And with all the preparation there, it was actually fine. IPs weren't as cold as we feared. So the cooling down of IPs was not as bad as we thought it would be. So we were very lucky there.
That must have been a big relief for you. So, you know, I think as deliverability experts for global email programs, you know, you're going to be reliant on tools and technology to monitor the performance of your program. So, Sjoerd, building on what you were just telling us, what are your go-to deliverability tools that you use every day?
I've got two main tools. One is Postmastery, which gives us a deliverability dashboard. Actually, we pump all our logs there that we get from the ESPs we send with. And they give us, not inbox placement, obviously, but they do give us deliverability rates, so bounce rates per IP, per domain. We also get bounce rates over time per IP, per domain, all these kinds of graphs. And we have alerting there as well. So if we hit a spam trap, or not spam traps, but if we hit rate limiting for a certain domain, I get notified. And I have weekly calls with them for them to go through the data as well to make sure I don't miss anything. Besides that, obviously we have Validity. Bi-weekly calls, they look at which listings do we have, how can we contact the ones where we have listings, how do we improve inbox placement, things like that. So these are my main tools.
Excellent, and thank you for that kind mention. Craig, does the same hold true for you?
Yes, definitely. I think one of the things we've definitely added to that is the idea of the Bright Verify. I mean, as we know, email addresses become stale and can be taken over as spam traps. So we try to use the Bright Verify validations as an additional way. Also, the certification has definitely helped us in a pinch where we send out a campaign that might have a little bit higher complaint rate that we wouldn't like. It allows us a little bit of flexibility in that aspect. The lucky part that I have is I not only am able to use Validity, but I'm also able to use Adobe's email deliverability team as kind of a second opinion, if you want to call it that, to help us make some major decisions when they're necessary.
Excellent. Interesting you hear it talking about, the sort of challenge that sort of slightly higher complaints pose for you. And Craig, when we were preparing for this session, you were actually made a really interesting point about, how obvious it is to you when you step outside of your regular audience. Would you like to build on that?
Yeah, definitely. When we step out our norm, we find ourselves in a situation where we just don't know how the consumers are going to accept or ACPs are going to accept our emails. But one of the things, again, the idea of using Validity and the monitoring tools that we have out there definitely is going to help us, or has helped us in the past, monitor and do good things with our emails.
That's great to hear. Now, a moment ago, we were talking about data quality, and I think for me, it's really interesting having two major senders, one on each side of the Atlantic Ocean. And we were talking about Europe introducing its new data protection laws 2 years ago. And it kind of feels 2 years down the line that there's actually a deliverability dividend, a positive one, as tighter consent and better data quality has come to the fore. Now, Sjoerd, you experienced that pain 2 years ago. How was it for you when those new regulations were implemented, and what did you see in local markets?
Well, at the time I was working for a different company that was actually also doing email delivery. And we had a couple hundred customers, mainly Dutch customers. And luckily, Dutch law, it was already very strict. So GDPR was very close to the Dutch law for implementation. So we were lucky there. But what we noticed on top of that senders definitely tried harder to implement the laws and best practices. Creating double opt-in, re-verifying their lists, making sure that people that didn't interact with their email for X amount of months would be removed or would have a final campaign before they were sunsetted. So there was definitely greater awareness, even in countries like the Netherlands.
So an appreciation that although these requirements were mandatory, they could actually be positive in terms of program performance. Craig, do you think there's anything that senders outside of Europe can learn from this? I mean, we're seeing new regulations introduced in North America now. Do you think it's similarly going to be a force for good?
I actually do think so. I mean, in the US alone, the open rates for healthcare professionals are lower than what you see in any of the other global markets. But I think that what the global markets have experienced with GDPR and the seeing of higher open rates, the less number of people are getting the emails, but they're opening and more engaged. Where I think in the US, we're not quite there yet. And I think that some of the states like California and Colorado, when they implement some of these restrictions, that's where we're going to start seeing the US model probably change to be implementing a little bit more stricter criteria than that B2B relationship I talked about earlier.
That's so interesting. And staying with you, Craig, because I think we're all now sort of focused on the fact that the holiday season, the peak sales season is coming up, and I think most email marketers are getting ready for it. But for your program, it's slightly different, isn't it? I mean, for you, peak season means something a little different, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So in the pharma industry, it's really based on the medication and when that disease state actually is impactful the most. Luckily, we actually don't have a holiday season, if you want to call it that. We have more a seasonal based on the medication. So flu season is a big one. That's when we start to send out medications related to the flu vaccinations and so on and so forth. We have other medications that are asthma related that are in peak season for those. But again, actually the holiday season, I actually do get to take a little bit of a break because I don't send out many emails during the month of December.
I'll bet you enjoy that. Does it touch on your program performance anyway, though? I mean, you know, we sort of had the recent Amazon Prime event. Does that create challenges secondhand for your program?
It definitely does. I mean, the idea that we want to try to have our emails at the top of the mailbox when appropriately, we really have to take into consideration any of those outside forces that are like the Amazon Prime, that we try to maybe limit or not send as strong of a message out during those times, still keeping normal type of messages like thank you for registering and those type of things still going out. But we definitely try to take those situations into consideration so we don't, you know, lose our opportunity and the open rates go way down, because then, you know, the marketers think it's not a good email when realistically it was just the wrong time.
So interesting. So, you know, not just your program, but also the broader environment that you're operating in. So, I think the holiday season, peak sales season, has a more traditional context for your program. How are you preparing for it this year?
Well, hopefully it will be business as usual, but we definitely have a lot of peak moments. One of them is obviously Black Friday, where we do a lot of promotion as well. It's always tricky deliverability wise, looking at past years. From a business perspective, we want to reach out to as many customers as possible. From a deliverability perspective, that's not ideal, because when you want to have as big as reach as possible, you always send more to less engaged contacts, where you have obviously the risk of hitting spam traps. So to make sure that we can still keep a big audience, I do a lot of proactive cleanup during basically the whole year. We're focusing mainly on the non-top 10 domains, which are often more problematic and also influence, for example, our return path certification, which then also influences the top 10 domains. So that's our main focus in this case.
A classic case of stitching time saves 9. So, you know, both of you experts in your field, if you met somebody starting out in deliverability and, you know, they've got a program which perhaps isn't as optimized as they would like it to be, what one piece of advice would you give them in terms of where to start in trying to help them improve the deliverability of their programs? Do you want to carry on sort of building on the sort of quality initiatives you were just talking about?
Only one. Yeah, so list engagement is very important. That's basically the main thing. Look at those people that have never opened an email in the past, not just in the last 6 months, but never ever opened an email, and start looking at that. Make sure you have your dashboarding in place, obviously, because otherwise you can't look at those. Yeah, I can list a couple more, but I think in case of time, we'll just move on.
And Craig, what would your golden piece of advice be for a newbie in the world of deliverability?
I've always treated email deliverability as more of an art and not a science. So I think that the idea of implementing just active criteria is great, and you'll keep good email deliverability criteria, but don't be afraid to challenge the less active audience with some good practices around sending out, you know, lesser but small volumes, so then you can actually build upon your active audience with that inactive segment.
So important. Now, we were going to also just touch on the future of deliverability. And I think over the years, we've seen deliverability become a lot more engagement focused. We've seen mailbox providers and email service providers now using artificial intelligence to improve deliverability. So looking into your crystal balls as we wrap up the session, what do you think the next big development in the field of deliverability is going to be? Craig, you first.
That's definitely interesting, and the challenging part I have is the pharma industry is very regulated, so we just can't send out any type of promotional information. So I think that we're always going to be a little bit behind the times when it comes to that. But I think that the idea of AI and the Gmail putting their different algorithms out there to help catch spammers is going to be a constant challenge, and we're going to see Yahoo and some of the other ones right behind it. So it's keeping an ear out of what's happening through the validity contacts and other people in the industry, and then kind of learn and adjust along the way.
Spot on. And Sjoerd, your best guess in terms of where the world of deliverability is going to head next?
Well, I think it's going to be more towards authentication. Obviously, we have DKIM and DMARC. They're not implemented that often, sadly. But if the inbox providers will actually start penalizing more on that, I think there'll be a stronger relationship also with the inbox providers like Yahoo and Hotmail and things like that.
I think that's absolutely right. So, I think you've both said it. Change is truly the only constant in the world of deliverability. There's certainly lots of development still to come. So, Sjoerd Engelblik from Booking.com, Craig Hood from AstraZeneca. It's been a fascinating conversation. I can't believe how quickly it's gone past. A real pleasure talking to both of you this afternoon. Thank you so much for making the time to join us at the summit. And Laura, back to you.
Thank you, Guy, Sjoerd, and Craig. Deliverability is certainly a concern for any marketing team that wants to climb to the top with their deliverability metrics. Let's hear from Validity's team for a quick look at how Everest helps you monitor and improve your deliverability while your campaign is in flight.
What really sets Everest apart is that it's the only platform with solutions designed to help your email performance while it's live. Everest gives you reliable insights about your inbox placement rate at different mailbox providers. That's because Everest uses thousands of seeds across over 100 webmail hosting and filtering providers, spanning 38 countries. It's the largest global seed list in the industry. You can even compare your placement metrics against other senders to diagnose whether your problems with a specific mailbox provider are tied to your program or if they're impacting everyone. It's the information you need to optimize your email deliverability. If you're serious about getting the most ROI from your email marketing, you'll need to do everything you can to preserve your sending reputation. Certification is the only program that preserves your high inbox placement rate at top mailbox providers to drive more ROI from your email channel.
And on top of that, Everest is the only place that gives you the benefits of view time optimization. Open rates drop quickly when your customers are getting bombarded with other emails. No more getting buried with all the other messages. Deliver email to top Verizon media inbox positions. Yahoo, AOL, Verizon.net, ATT.net, and more, the moment users are active in their inbox. Senders have seen double their normal click-through rate and a 4-time increase in opens at participating mailbox providers. And you can only get it with Everest.
Welcome back. So in the previous session, we talked about what's happening now in email. Now we're going to talk about what's happening next. The expression goes that necessity is the mother of invention, but I think we could also say that necessity is the mother of innovation. In a hugely disruptive year, email programs have had to innovate rapidly to remain relevant, but also to survive. And of course, at Validity, we've been innovating too. And Everest is absolutely one of the biggest developments in the world of email this year, which we're celebrating today. So joining me to talk about what's happening next in the world of email, got three great panelists. Firstly, Marcel Becker, Director of Product Management at Verizon Media. Marcel is driving business and product requirements for email deliverability and anti-abuse efforts for all consumer mail products at Verizon Media, while leading initiatives for next-gen consumer email experiences. Welcome, Marcel. Joining Marcel is Laura Livingood, Senior Manager of Marketing Automation at TCF National Bank. From email automation implementations to ridiculously messy company mergers, Laura has spent her career working through some of the most chaotic parts of marketing and delivering the right message at the right time to TCF's customers and clients. Laura will try to avoid the chaos as much as we can in the next 20 minutes. And our third panelist, Seth Weisfield, Head of Growth Product at Pinterest. Seth has more than 15 years of experience in growth marketing and leads Pinterest teams to solve user problems with a combination of cutting-edge technology, product development, and marketing techniques. It's fantastic to have the three of you with us for this panel session. So, you know, in our preamble, we were talking about the fact that we've seen a load of innovation this year. I think, you know, in the newspapers, they've talked about the fact that we've probably seen 5 years of innovation crammed into a single year. So thinking about your own businesses, and Marcel, I'm going to start with you. How have you been thinking about email innovation in your roles?
Yeah, sure. I would say, and obviously I'm biased, that we're probably on the forefront of new ideas, new concepts, new tools, new technology we want to bring to the market. And especially this year, obviously, which is different and challenging on so many levels. We believe we have a really good tool set to actually help marketeers to do something a little bit different, right? We usually see when senders or marketeers want to change things or they need to tweak certain KPIs, and whether they look at the right KPIs, that's a question there. And you guys obviously talked a little bit about that during the previous panel. Usually the answer is, oh, we just send more, we do more of the same, right? And I think this year we have an opportunity, even though it's a challenging one, to actually have marketeers and senders leverage and use some of the new tools and use and try some of these new technologies and some of the innovations we put out there and actually see how they can make a difference and how we can actually all work together and use these to actually create a much better user experience for our mutual customers at the end of the day.
That makes so much sense. Laura, in a sector like yours, I think I'd imagine that customer relationships are really, really important. And has that informed how you've been innovating this year?
Oh, definitely. I mean, looking at just the year of COVID, of closures, of staying home, I think there were so many things, especially within the financial sector, that we had to innovate and change quickly. On the email side, we found ourselves in just a pile of noise within people's inboxes because we all had something important to say. So really, my team had to kind of step back and think of innovation in a new way, not so much what we can do with new technology, but how can we look at what we already have in front of us and kind of ideate and come up with different ways to show up in the inbox with a message that is absolutely pertinent to the people that we need to talk to.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And Seth, same question for you. How have you been interesting at Pinterest this year?
Yeah, you know, I really loved Laura's answer. And I think for us also, we're looking at more people being, having time on the computers, time on their phones. We're seeing an increase in engagement with email, and it's really getting back to the basics, the fundamentals. What's the right message at the right time for the right person? reassessing our frequency technologies and really our messaging programs from top to bottom. And it's an interesting opportunity to reapply some of the newer technologies that are out there to some of these problems. But ultimately, it's really investing in those basics.
So interesting to see you hear you say that. It's definitely been a year of going back to the basics and doing them well. So speaking of which, obviously, we all spend a lot of time thinking about our own email programs, but it's also, as practitioners, entirely natural to be impressed by what others are doing. And Laura, I know that you've seen one or two programs that you looked at and thought, that's really smart in terms of how they've been innovating this year. Want to walk us through them?
Definitely. So going back to the basics, I think there are several brands that have just stepped back and realized how they can meet you where you are. So I know IKEA, I love furniture and I'm home all the time now. IKEA has done a phenomenal job of just plopping into your inbox with relevant content. Is your chair uncomfortable? Oh, you're home now, time to remodel. So I think they've done a phenomenal job of really stepping into the life that a lot of us are living and meeting us there. And I've also been really impressed by all of these food delivery services. They have been using time zones and meal times so effectively to show up in your inbox and inspire you not to cook. And instead use them.
Spot on. And Marcel, I know you're a big fan of Skipify. Want to talk us through that one?
Yeah, and probably almost nobody knows who they are. I don't know, unless you followed the announcements around AMP for email. They're not so much a sender really, but one of the tools or the technologies I'm really following, and again, I'm biased there, but I believe it will help us in the industry, is obviously AMP for email. And we just announced that we launched AMP for email support in Yahoo Mail last week. And Skipify is a company who very quickly, I wouldn't say they scrambled, but very quickly they leveraged the tools they adopted, and they're using AMP and the opportunity it actually allows you to do to go even further. We had a lot of senders struggling with what AMP can do for them, and I think I think that was caused by a lot of us in the industry just talking about tools and technologies, right? And when you go to a sender or a marketeer, they have no clue what you're talking about, right? And typically, we do not sell, in other parts of the industry, we do not sell HTML email and cool CSS, right? We sell solutions and experiences. And we should have done the same with AMP. So a lot of senders, I think, struggled with, okay, what does it even mean? Like, how can I build and create personalized emails, to Laura's point, right? Because they're really hitting home nowadays with the increase in volume. So long story short, what they really did, they went above and beyond what anybody else imagined you could actually do with AMP. And they created very quickly shoppable emails, right? You want to buy something, we know from our numbers, a lot of people buy things within emails. 96% of all emails we receive are commercial. 25% of our users use email to shop almost exclusively, right? We call that email window shopping. And so what better way to actually keep them within the email environment, reduce friction, and actually increase conversions than closing the deal right within an email. And that's what they have done. And they could even do that with emails which were not AMP. So they amplify HTML emails. They, some hand waving secret sauce, magic, fairy dust, and then poof, it works. And that just, amazed me.
That's really smart. Now, we all get excited when a sort of new piece of technology comes to market and we're thinking, right, how can we use that? Craig, what's your favorite new piece of technology in the email space? Beg your pardon, I'm getting my names mixed up. Seth, I'm going to direct this one to you. What's your favorite new piece of technology that you've seen in the email space this year?
Yeah, I think we've been out there talking about our use of AMP and our interest and investment in that. I think we found AMP is a useful tool, but as Marcel said, I think it's we still need more infrastructure to be there. We need examples of how to use it, and we need some innovation in tracking and analytics. But we're pretty excited about that. Where we really spend most of our time, though, is in applying machine learning. And that's, as somebody who's been doing this for 15 years and started his career manually cutting lists to figure out the right audiences, I can tell you putting some automation behind that adds an incredible amount to what you can do to get the right message to the right person.
I think that's absolutely right. But there is a caveat to new technology as well, because it's easy to get very excited about it and think, we absolutely need that in our business. But, you do need to be doing it for the right reasons. And, sometimes email is almost a victim of its own success. I've come across more than one company where the fact that email is working so well for a business already that, when you come to your stakeholders and position an idea which may change things, there's active resistance. It's like if it ain't broke, there's no need to fix it. So what would your advice be, when you're planning on introducing a new piece of technology to your company to get the buy-in of the people who need to be buying in? Laura, you first.
Sure. Coming from the financial industry, we're highly regulated. So when you come to the table with a fantastic new idea and a new technology, you're often met with resistance because is it going to have some sort of legal or compliance implication? And so for me, it always goes to building that business case around what the success could be. What success you're already seeing, acknowledging what you've been doing and what has been great, but then showing that next step to it. I think even the conversation around AMP, like you said, the infrastructure needs to be there, but how can you break it down into 12 different steps and start to sell those little steps individually to get to that final solution? I found for me, that is our greatest winner, to kind of show the path versus just the finish line.
Absolutely agree. And perhaps, being careful to make the point that it's not just technology for technology's sake, but what is the outcome for your business that the technology is designed to produce. Marcel, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, being a product manager and looking at how can we create a better experience for consumers? I think this is the first rule anybody should have when you talk about new things. Like, what is the actual user experience? What does it do to the consumers? And I believe in many cases we just tend to focus too much on the technology and the implications, or the financials, or the lack of ROI, and versus just focusing on what can we actually achieve, what can we build, what is the story behind it. And in many cases, it's also, I think, a lack of insight and awareness at the top of some of these businesses. No offense to anybody in the room or anybody watching, but I believe a lot of email marketeers are not treated equally or the same as maybe some other brand or marketing representatives, right? And when you really look at your brand and how you position your brand and the features and the things you sell, email is not just this flyer you print a million times and then just lob it over the fence to the mailbox providers. It should be, you should treat it as a tool which really helps you to create an awesome and beautiful experience for your customers, right? It's not any different than a customer going into your store or a customer buying things online at your website, right? It should be an equal outlet as far as the experience is concerned. And you should look at that with the same lens and then see, okay, what is available? What can we do? And listen to your experts, listen to your email experts, right? Or maybe also, talk to them and and have them invite other experts, bring them to the table, right? I always talk about collaborating in the email industry. We tend to cluster, right? There are mailbox providers, and they talk about the new cool things, and then they just announce them to the world, and the senders are like, what the heck am I going to do with that, right? I think we all need to collaborate a little bit more, understand the other side of the business, really understand what tools can be doing, and then help each other to be equipped with the right information so we can actually go to these guys with the checkbook and say, this is what we need, and here's why we need it, and here's what it does for you.
Seth, a lot of nodding there while Laura and Marcel were talking, so clearly their points are resonating with you. Anything additional to add in terms of how you introduce new technology at Pinterest?
No, I mean, I think all right. I think they really had it covered pretty well. I think ultimately you just have to make sure you have the value proposition really clear. What is this going to bring for your receivers, your recipients? What is this going to bring for your business? And I found if you can just focus on how this solves a user problem and how this solves a business problem, and keep that thread through your whole process, that's the most effective way to get it adopted.
I agree. And, we've sort of talked about how, the pandemic throughout this year has almost acted as a catalyst for innovation. And unfortunately, it feels like we might be stuck with the pandemic for months to come. So, hopefully the upside of that is more innovation. And do we think that's the case? And if so, what might it look like? Laura, do you want to have a try at that?
Sure. Yeah, the pandemic that will never go away. I think it's, instead of looking at it as, at least from my angle, looking at it as this thing that has revolutionized our lives, the way we live our day to day, I keep trying to look at it as an opportunity to be creative. And I try, at least in my own world, to think of innovation and creativity kind of hand in hand, because we have all of this data from our customers, from our clients, just sitting at our fingertips, that now the pandemic has given us an opportunity to slow down for a moment, to look at it, and to build something great. So in the financial industry, specifically where I am, we've taken a step back and looked at who are the people that come into our physical branches? How often do they come in? Do we need to communicate with them first? Look at the people who have never touched our digital tools. It's shocking to me in this day and age that we can have a large percentage of customers in the financial industry who have never touched the website. And so how can we use email to bridge that gap from what is comfortable, email, to what is uncomfortable, is web tools? So for us, our really kind of creative innovation challenge within this pandemic is making it so that we can get all of our customers into a more digital world in a kind way.
Absolutely. Marcel, very briefly, but while we were preparing for this session, you made a great point about how increasingly more and more shopping is going to be done online. So you need to make it as frictionless a process as possible. Any advice and guidance in terms of how you go about achieving that?
No, just some thoughts. I mean, I would not say that I, have the perfect answer or the silver bullet, so to speak, on how to do all of that. But I think it goes back to what I said earlier. Try to put yourself into the shoes of your customers, right? What would you want to experience when you actually get these emails? And create the best possible experience really you can. And again, try to see what else is out there. Try to see what other tools are out there. Try to see what innovations have been made in the email space, to keep with the topic here. I think if you leverage those tools, you can actually build a much better experience than just that boring flyer you used to send out, but just telling people, hey, go to this website to buy whatever I have to sell. And we as consumers, we will appreciate that, right? Less email, more relevant, Laura had great examples from IKEA and the food delivery services. And I think that should be the North Star for everybody.
Spot on, Marcel. We have burned through our time in this session. I can't believe that we've used up our 20 minutes already. 10 seconds for each of you just to wrap up. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you make email do that it doesn't do currently? Seth?
Same rendering in all providers. Everyone treats HTML and AMP the exact same way. I build one email, it works everywhere.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Laura?
I want to steal his answer. I originally said that everyone would have their authentication set up correctly, but I like his better.
And Marcel?
And then I go with the authentication one, because that would really help us a lot. 90% of the email we get is bad. Do authenticate your email, be part of the 10%.
I'm with you there. So there you have it. Be prepared to do something different, do it authentically, strive for perfection. Marcel Becker from Verizon Media, Laura Livingood from TCF National Bank, and Seth Weisfeld from Pinterest. It's been such fun reviewing a year of remarkable innovation and gazing into your crystal balls to predict what's coming next. It's been a real pleasure chatting with all of you this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us at the summit. And Laura, with that, it's back to you.
Thank you, Guy. And Guy, Marcel, Laura, and Seth, thanks to all of you. We are certainly looking forward to seeing many of those innovations come to fruition. And you can be sure that innovations like these will be part of our Everest platform going forward. So we'll take one last look at Everest. This time we'll look at how it helps with the post-send optimization and also the monitoring of your email performance.
Learning from the past and applying that to future endeavors is a true advantage. The fact is, when it comes to giving you actionable data to analyze and make improvements for your next deployment, Everest stands alone. Our industry-leading reputation network covers over 2.5 billion mailboxes and gives you access to the largest trap network in the world, allowing Everest to analyze over 3 trillion data points a year, so you can build and maintain your status as a world-class sender. Everest consolidates that information and all email service provider data into a single, easy-to-use dashboard, giving you the deeper analytics and contextual answers that you need to get more mail delivered.
It's really remarkable how one solution can take care of your email program in all of these phases. It's the only platform designed by a dream team of email professionals. The same teams that brought you products like ReturnPath, 250OK, and Bright Verify, used by 9 out of the top 10 retailers in the US. It's something truly special, and we know once you use it, you'll be blown away. Thanks for your time.
Our final speaker today is world-renowned climber and 7-time Ed Viesturs. Ed is going to share some amazing stories of his expeditions, as well as some of the breathtaking mountainscape views, while discussing how focus and determination have helped him reach his own strategic goals. Welcome, Ed Viesturs.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be a part of this virtual summit and the launch of this email platform, Everest. Summits and Everest are both near and dear to me. And today I hope to take you out of your room, take you on some journeys, and ultimately inspire you and show you that we can climb out of adversity. These are trying times today. And I've learned a lot in the mountains, and hopefully a lot of the messages and ideas that I bring to you might help you to succeed through adversity. I've been now climbing for over 40 years, and people often ask me the question of how I could do something like this for so long, something that's not easy. It's not always fun. You're never comfortable. And truth be told, I like climbing simply because it is hard. It's based on my personality. I like the involvement. You know, when you go on an expedition to one of these mountains over 8,000 meters, which is over 26,000 feet, you spend literally 3 months climbing one mountain. But prior to that, there's an immense amount of time and energy and investment and preparation that goes into getting ready to do one of these climbs. The logistics, putting the team together, organizing the equipment, buying the permits, doing the physical training. And all of that is what I call doing my homework, because when I arrive on that particular mountain, then that's where I take my test. And as you get higher, when you get closer to the goal that you've been striving for, it actually gets harder as you get closer to the summit. It gets colder, the air gets thinner, and it's as if the mountain is trying to conspire to prevent you from succeeding. And because of that, you need to be patient and persistent and resilient, and you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. There's a lot of risk involved, as you can imagine, and I'm sure you've read a lot about mountaineering tragedies and accidents, and there are elements of risk, and I break it down into two different segments. There's the objective danger, the avalanches and the storms, the things that we can't control, that we have to accept. But in my opinion, the majority of risk in the mountains is based on decision making and the choices and the subjective part of what you do and how you do it. And you can imagine there's a lot of ambitious people out there climbing mountains, a huge investment of money, tremendous expectation to succeed. And many of these people are willing to summit at all costs. And you have to learn how to temper your ambition and how to pull back when you need to, and listen to the mountain is something that I'm very adamant about. I love climbing, but ultimately I like being alive a lot more, and learning how to be patient and temper that ambition is something that I think has kept me alive. 10 years ago or so, somebody suggested that I write about my stories and my ideas and what I learned and the lessons. And so we put this book together. And to me, the overriding key was to create a title that conveyed those messages in a few words. And for me, the idea of no shortcuts to the top was paramount. You know, we in the mountain world, we earn our summits day by day, step by step, breath by breath. And after achieving a goal, you want to look back on what you created and how you treated people and the journey you took to get there. And that's ultimately the story that I wanted to convey. The book is done rather well, although a lot of people said I would have sold way more books had I titled it Shortcuts to the Top. It was, in fact, a book that inspired me to go on my journey and to start climbing. I read this book titled Annapurna in 1975. I was in high school, and I was growing up at the time in what we know as the great mountaineering state of Illinois. But this book inspired me. It was the story of a group of 8 climbers from France that went to this mountain called Annapurna in the Himalaya. And Annapurna is one of only 14 peaks in the world over 8,000 meters. And at the time, not even Everest had been climbed. This was 1950. And this group of 8 climbers literally stepped off the map. They spent 3 months together battling on this mountain together as a team. And in the end, they put 2 of their climbers on the summit. And that's how the logistics of these expeditions work. You work as a team, and ultimately you know that maybe only 1 or 2 of you will plant the flag on the summit. And that's something that you sign up for. And after reading that story, it flipped a switch. And I thought that, for me, is something that I want to do. Eventually, in my life, I wanted to climb Annapurna, or I wanted to climb Everest. And obviously, I couldn't do that overnight. There was a lot of things I had to learn, experiences to gain, steps I had to take. The first step I knew I had to take was, to get the hell out of Illinois. So I left Illinois right out of high school, and I moved myself to Seattle, Washington. And mostly because of the terrain. 2 hours from downtown, you can be climbing amazing mountains. It has a great history of creating strong Himalayan climbers, and that's what drew me to the Pacific Northwest. And the mountain that I focused a lot of my attention on was Mount Rainier. This is our iconic peak in the Northwest. It's 14,400 feet high. And I felt that this, for me, would be that perfect classroom. It had all those elements of a high altitude mountain that I wanted to experience. 14,000 feet of altitude, terrible weather, steep terrain. And this is where I started, and this is where I began to gain the experience that I needed. This was my stepping stone. And after a few years of climbing on my own, I applied for and I got a job to work as a guide on Mount Rainier, and this was in 1982. And I worked there for 10 seasons, and I made 215 ascents of Mount Rainier. And I took hundreds and hundreds of customers to the summit of Mount Rainier. And I learned a lot of lessons. And the primary goal for us as guides is safety. And we learned that if we rope together with each other as a team of 4 or 5 people, we're stronger and we're safer. And I was also surrounded by senior guides that have 15 more years experience than me, and they became my teachers and my mentors. And when you have customers that come to you to lead them to the summit of these mountains, you can imagine there's a lot of expectation. They spend time, energy, they've bought new gear from REI. They come and they want to climb to the summit of this mountain. And that's our job as guides, is to help them do that. But our primary goal is to keep them alive. And second to that is to provide a good customer experience. That's similar to what you try to do with your email platform. They walk away and they say, I had a great experience with that particular company. Ultimately, we try to get to the summit of these mountains with our customers, but we, in essence, don't get to decide whether we've paid a lot of money, whether we've trained hard, whether we have shiny new gear from REI. Ultimately, it's the mountain that decides what we get to do and what we don't get to do. And I call that listening to the mountain. You take in all that information that the environment is providing, and you make your choices and your decisions based on that. And listening to the mountain was probably the key lesson that I took away as a guide, and it's kept me alive ever since. I started to dream and think that possibly I could, maybe someday, try to climb Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth, 29,000 feet high, only a third the amount of oxygen that there is at sea level on the summit. Everest was first climbed in 1953, a British expedition. 40 people worked together for 3 months on that mountain so that 2 of the team could reach the summit, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. So there's that teamwork, again, that helps you to achieve a goal. Second to that was the use of supplemental oxygen. That gives you strength and energy at 29,000 feet. And I truly believe that since Hillary and Norgay used oxygen for the very first ascent of Everest, it kind of became the standard of how you climb these high altitude mountains. You want to get to the summit. You don't really care how you get there, and oxygen helps you to achieve the goal. But in essence, what it is doing is reducing the altitude of the mountain by about 6,000 or 7,000 feet. So it's pulling it to your capabilities. I personally decided before going to Everest that it was more important to me how I climbed Everest rather than just if. And to me, that meant not using oxygen. I felt the use of oxygen was a bit of a contrived way of gaining success. And I really wanted to test myself to see if I could climb to 29,000 feet without oxygen. I knew it'd be harder, I would suffer more, and ultimately I felt the experience would be greater. And so that was a hard, fast rule that I set for myself. 10 years into my career, I was invited to go on my first Himalayan expedition, and that was to go to Mount Everest. And when you go to these Himalayan mountains, they're halfway around the world: Nepal, Pakistan, Tibet. Everest is in Nepal. You fly into Kathmandu, you drive to the end of the road, and then to get to the base of the mountain, you then walk for 2 weeks, bringing all of your supplies with you during that process, and eventually you arrive at the base camp of Mount Everest. And this is at just under 18,000 feet. So most people assume once you get the base camp, you rest for a while, and the next day you go for the summit. It takes a lot longer than that. In fact, we're going to be on this particular mountain now for 3 months, 8 of us working together as a team. And to do the work, we have to actually build 4 camps stationed above base camp, each within a day's climb away, so that eventually 8 to 10 weeks later, we can climb through those set camps, and on the 5th day, we go for the summit. So the bulk of the expedition and time is taken by us as a team working together day by day, carrying loads of equipment to these various camps. And for the initial part of the climb, for the first 10 days of the climb, all we do is go back and forth, over and back, up and down, just to Camp 1, to supply that camp with tents, sleeping bags, rope, food, fuel, oxygen. Once Camp 1 is supplied, we then start carrying loads to Camp 2. We repeat the process to Camp 3. We're going up and down, back and forth, literally like ants on an anthill. And it is a very logistical process. It's a supply chain of stuff that we're sending up in a very timely and organized fashion to these camps. 8 weeks later, if it all goes well, we finally then establish Camp 4 at 27,000 feet. This is our highest and final camp. And as you approach these altitudes now, imagine the amount of work that still has to be done. But with the lack of oxygen, the amount of work that you can do actually goes down, and the loads that you can carry decrease to the point where Camp 1 ends up being one little tent with just enough supplies then for 2 people to occupy on their way to the summit. So 8 weeks have gone by. We've done all the work that we've needed to do. We're acclimatized. We've built enough red blood cells now to function at altitude. But now it's time to pick the 2 people that are going to represent the team to go to the summit. We come down to base camp, we regroup, we have a meeting. The leader looks around the room and says, okay, who wants to go to the summit? Nobody raises their hand, because you know what? All the motivation that you had in the bar 6 months ago is gone. So how do you pick those 2 people that are going to now go for the summit based on their motivation, based on their strength, and also based on who has contributed during the initial part of the expedition? I was one of the 2 people selected now to climb to the summit with a partner to represent that effort. So we leave base camp. We climb for the first 4 days. We arrive at Camp 4. We spend the night. And at 1 o'clock the next morning, this is the 5th day of that final push, we begin the final ascent to the summit. And we start literally in the dark, knowing that it's going to take 12 hours from here to reach the summit. And that early start allows us not only to get to the summit, but also to descend before dark. It's going to be an 18-hour round trip. And at these altitudes, you're so far removed now from any sort of safety or rescue. Literally every step that you take and every decision you make has a consequence. And rather than thinking in the moment continuously, we think about our consequences in the future. 10 hours into that day, we reached a summit altitude of 28,700 feet. We're now 300 vertical feet away from the top of the world. We could see the summit, but the weather was rapidly deteriorating. We could tell that things were going to get worse over the next 2 hours if we chose to go to the summit. And based on the risk, my partner and I decided that there was no way we could go to the summit and also survive the descent. And it was at that point, 200, 300 feet from the summit of Everest, we decided to stop and to turn around. And that was literally then the end of the expedition. And imagine making that decision. You're 2 hours away from the top of the world. You've spent months of preparation, a lot of money, a lot of expectation, a lot of pressure to succeed. And this is where a lot of people keep going and climb to the summit. And that's what causes their demise, trying to come down in the event of terrible weather. We listened to the mountain. And I don't call that a failure. We did all we could. It was a situation that was beyond our control. The risk was too great. We had to stop and we had to turn around, and we walked away. And you know what? I knew that mountain was going to be there for a long time. And I knew I would probably have the opportunity to go back and try to climb Everest again. And in fact, I did. And in fact, it was not until my 3rd expedition to Everest that I finally had another opportunity to try to climb to the summit. Once again, I left Camp 4, 27,000 feet. And on this particular summit push, I was alone. It was just the way the logistics of that climb worked out. And that was fine with me. I could do the technical aspects of the climb, but the hard part was trying to do this by myself, to set a pace, to kick the steps in the snow, to keep myself motivated. And for 12 hours without oxygen, knowing that for every step that I took, I would breathe 15 times. Imagine doing that for 12 hours. And during that day, you're kind of, first of all, wondering, why am I doing this? Why do I like this? And how do I decide to keep going rather than quitting? Quitting's easy, right? You can stop the pain. You can go down and say, it was too hard. But I kept pushing and I kept motivated and I kept breathing. And eventually, 12 hours into that day, I found myself on the summit of Everest, all by myself. And one of the hardest days of my life, but one of the most rewarding days of my life as well, to be on the summit of the world all by yourself. Pretty cool. But not so cool. I thought, who's going to take my picture? I need something for the office wall. So I have an ice axe with me and I stick it in the ground vertically, balance my camera on top of that. And this is how I took my own selfie then on the summit of Everest. And then you take in this spectacular view. You're literally looking down on every other mountain on Earth. And at that moment, I was the highest person on the planet. I thought to myself, memorize this view. You're not coming up here again, right? You climb Everest once and you go down. You're not going to come back here. Little did I know I would eventually climb Everest 6 more times in my career. And I think I have a legitimate excuse for going up the second time. I left my wallet up there, so I had to go back. So what do you do after Everest? For a lot of climbers, that's the pinnacle of a mountaineering career. For me and other climbers, we look at these other 8,000 meter peaks as even more challenging than Everest. They're not quite as high, but technically they test us in different ways. And I always wanted to elevate myself and take what I've learned and experienced and push myself to a new level. So after Everest, I went to this mountain called Kanchenjunga, just 800 feet lower than Everest. It's the 3rd highest peak in the world, technically more challenging. This is a 3,000 foot sheet of ice that we had to climb even before thinking of going to the summit. But eventually, 2.5 months into this climb, 3 of us reached the summit of this amazing mountain. And here we are at 28,000 feet on this little island in the sky. And on a good day, if it's early enough and the weather's nice, we can stay on the top for about an hour. If the day is late and the weather's bad, 2 or 3 minutes, and we turn around and go down. But this was a beautiful day. We got an amazing view. This is looking 80 miles off to the west. And there, just left of center, you can see Mount Everest on the horizon. People think that when you climb to the summit and you get there, that's when you celebrate, right? You've achieved your goal. Why not? I've always felt that when I'm on the summit, it's way too premature to celebrate because, in fact, I've only done half of what I've set out to do. I've done the first half, but I've always felt that the second half of a climb, the descent, is ultimately more important. Getting to the summit is optional. Getting down is mandatory. It has to be a round trip. And a lot of people lose sight of that. They use all of their energy and resources just to get to the top, and they really don't have a plan for going down. And most accidents and deaths, in fact, occur on the way down. So you have to plan for the round trip and budget for it as well. So what next? In 1992, after having climbed Everest and Kanchenjunga, I felt ready to really test myself on this particular mountain called K2. Second highest mountain in the world, 700 feet lower than Everest, and in many ways, the hardest mountain on Earth to climb. Technically challenging, unpredictable weather. We call it the Holy Grail. And in 92, I felt ready to try. I went with a partner and a friend of mine. This is Scott Fisher, also from Seattle. And we had done our homework. When we got to K2, we'd read about what it could do to you, how steep it was, how many issues there would be, rescues that might be needed, bad weather situations, how long and how hard it was going to be. This is something that we expected, and this is in fact something that happened that year. But during that first 2 months of battle on K2, the majority of our team gave up and went home. And the overriding reasons were that it was too hard and it was taking too long. And for me, I didn't quite get it because I knew ultimately that's what K2 was all about. Eventually, Scott and I managed to set up our fourth and highest camp. This is at 26,000 feet. This is our little envelope of nylon, which weighs 5 pounds, and to make our tents lighter, we make them smaller, literally the size of a single bed. And we park ourselves there for the night, hoping that the next day we can climb that final 2,200 feet to the summit. The hardest day by far is ahead of us. So that night, I mean, you're thinking about tomorrow. You're anxious, you're worried, you're nervous, you're excited. You know, will I be strong enough tomorrow? Did I train hard enough 3 months ago? Will the weather allow us to go? And so we just want to get up and go. We woke up the next morning to this. A storm had come in. 3 feet of snow had fallen and was still falling. Conditions were much too dangerous for us to even consider going to the summit that day. What should we do? We thought about going down and escaping to safety. And we thought, yeah, we can do that. But if it took us that long and that hard to get to here, if we go down today, we'll never make it back up to here. So we decided to wait. My partner and I in this little tent for 3 days. We stayed there together. And this is where you really, really have to like who you're with, because there's nothing to do up there. And you think you're just resting and relaxing and eating. In fact, you're actually slowly withering away because of the altitude. But luckily, 3 days later, that window of weather cleared, the opportunity came, and we were then allowed to climb to the summit of K2. And that final ascent took us 10 hours. And finally there, we stood on the summit of K2, one of the most challenging peaks of my life. And I look back on that ascent and the duration and the challenges and the difficulties. And I looked at myself and I thought, I have what it takes to climb the highest peak in the world. The persistence, the patience, the planning, the preparation, and more importantly, knowing how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so my resume now looked like this. I had climbed the 3 highest mountains on Earth, and it had been rather random. And I wanted to continue to climb more of these 8,000 meter peaks. I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I embraced it. I was good at it. And I made the decision then and there to go out and try to climb all 14 of these remaining 8,000 meter peaks. I figured I'd done 3. There's only 11 left. And so I called my project Endeavor 8000. And I really didn't know how long it would take. Would it take 10 more years? Would it take 15 years? It didn't matter to me. It would take as long as it would take. And this is this journey that I would go on, Endeavor 8000. The next part of it I had to do was to figure out the teams of people that I would do these climbs with. And I thought it was going to be kind of hard to keep 8 or 10 people together for the next 10 years. Why not find one partner that's doing exactly what I'm doing in exactly the same way? And there's a lot of criteria when you look for a partner like that. And I found this guy, Veka Gustafsson, in 1995. We met. And more importantly than anything, you have to like each other, because if you don't like each other at sea level, you will not like each other at 26,000 feet. And the other criteria is that we have to trust each other with our skills, implicit trust. We are roped together in this dangerous arena, and we need to trust each other every single step of the way. And Veka then became my #1 go-to partner for the next 10 years. We had great success. And ultimately as well, I'm more proud of this than anything, great safety record. For every 3 expeditions we went on, everything went right. Nothing went wrong. And safe and sound, we'd reach the summit, and safe and sound, we'd make our way back down. Never got frostbite, never had an accident, never had a rescue, and more importantly, never lost a climbing partner, which in my world is extremely rare. And I'm very proud about that. But on a third of these climbs, you know, we go halfway around the world. This is another one of these mountains in Pakistan. This is called Broad Peak. We spent 2 months climbing this thing. And on our final push to the summit, we were then stopped just 100 vertical feet away from the summit based on dangerous snow conditions. And still, there and then, we stopped and we turned around and we walked away, knowing that the risk was too great. I'm now very well into my career. And as you can imagine, and I saw this with a lot of other climbers in my world, the amount of pressure to succeed was growing. You have the media following you. You've got a fan base. You've got sponsors with expectations. Your expectations increase as well. And being in this world of risk, you have a tendency to perhaps be comfortable with that risk. And also there's a tendency to slightly become complacent as well. You know, we're already on that fine line between safety and danger. And throughout your whole career, you follow the rules that you learned as a younger climber. And it's that one day you decide to maybe step over that edge, to take a shortcut, to break your rule for the sake of success, to save time, to save money. And I had to learn how to put blinders on and to prevent any outside source of influence to change how I was doing what I was doing or how I thought about what I was doing. And that was a very hard thing to do. And I saw a lot of people in my peer group that broke their rules for the sake of success. And sadly, a lot of them never returned home. I remembered my foundations of why and how I started climbing, and I was doing it for me and not doing it for anybody else. And so with those rules in place and those thoughts in place and the determination and the partnership, I kept plugging along year after year, climb after climb, amazing journeys, beautiful mountains, wonderful experiences. And then 17 years into this project, I looked at my list and I discovered I had done 13 of these 14 mountains. I only had one mountain left on the list. And lo and behold, that final mountain, Annapurna. Remember that mountain that I read about as a kid? This was now the last peak of the 14. People often think that I left Annapurna for the end. In fact, I hadn't. I'd already tried Annapurna twice earlier in my career. But this is known as the most dangerous of these 8,000 meter peaks based on the avalanche activity that occurs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's no safe way to control the objective danger of Annapurna. And of 180 people that had only climbed it, 60 people had died trying. I knew the risks. And on my first two attempts of Annapurna, simply saw the activity of danger. And with my partner, Veka, we left on both of those previous expeditions. I started to think now, was climbing Peak 14, Annapurna, worth the risk? And at the moment, I thought it wasn't. I thought, first of all, don't die on Annapurna, because that's not going to look good on the resume. And I felt it just wasn't worth it. And I almost put it aside, being content with 13 out of the 14. But the more I thought about it, I thought, I can't make the decision safe and warm at home. I need to go back to Annapurna and sit at the bottom of that mountain, and it will tell me what to do. If conditions were just as bad, I'd go home once again. But I wouldn't know if conditions might possibly be better unless I went there and looked at the mountain. So I made the decision to go back with my partner for the third attempt. At that point in my life, I'd been married for 10 years. I had 2 kids at home, so I had a lot of other things to think about. But believe it or not, my wife supported my decision to go. She knew how I trained. She knew the decisions that I made, and she full on supported me going back. She never once said no or doubted me. And to have somebody like that at home that supports you, that believes you, that cheerleads you, that lightens your load and that helps you to succeed. So my partner, Vek, and I, we go back to Annapurna. This is now our third attempt on this mountain. This is the spring of 2005. We park ourselves at the bottom of this thing and we watch it and we listen to it. And it was an amazing season that year. It was colder. The mountain was glued together. There was little avalanche activity. And there and then we made the decision that we felt it was safe enough that season to climb for the summit. We were at the right place at the right time, and we took advantage of that opportunity. At this point, we'd been climbing together for 10 years. We were a well-oiled team. We trusted each other. We believed in each other. We helped each other. We motivated each other. And together on May 12th, we took those final steps. And then together, we sat on the summit of Annapurna. For me, this was my ultimate dream come true. This journey that I had taken, this kid in Illinois that read a book, that made a plan, that went on this journey, that had this 18-year project that I completed for myself. And to stay motivated during those years, to keep going, to keep it funded, and more importantly, to survive it and to finally achieve that goal. It was one of the highlights of my life, to having successfully sat on the summit of Annapurna, my 14th 8,000 meter peak. So why was Annapurna at the end? Again, I didn't plan for it to be at the end, but I'm glad it was, because I think I truly needed 30 years of experience to not only succeed on Annapurna, but to survive it. So it came the right time in my career. And I think you'll find that as well. In your career, you'll have a goal or an obstacle or a challenge, and you'll be ready for it. You might not have been ready for it 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but you'll know when you're ready for that next big challenge. And also poetically, this book that I read as a kid that put me on this journey to climbing Annapurna, I'll never forget that process. So my life had now come full circle. I'll leave you now with the last sentence of this amazing book. Pictured on the summit here on the cover is the leader of the climb and the author, Maurice Herzog. And the last sentence of this book, he says, we all have our own Annapurna. And I think that's a great metaphor for life or for business. The horizon of your career is a series of challenges, a series of mountains. There's valleys in between, right? There's issues that occur. There's obstacles along the way. But every time you reach a summit and a goal and achieve that goal, you want to elevate yourself, to grow and expand, to increase your business, to do something new and innovate. And you know it's a bumpy road to success. Some years you're doing amazing. Some years there's an obstacle in your path, such as this year, where you felt like you're not going anywhere. If anything, you're going backward. But it is a bumpy, long road to success. And the way we climb mountains is we don't overwhelm ourselves with the immensity. We do it a day at a time, a step at a time, and a breath at a time. And that's what you focus on in the moment. Obviously, you surround yourself with partners and coworkers and teammates. They help you. You unify. You help each other synergistically. Your family, your friends, they help you as well. So there's partnership. There's patience, persistence, planning, perseverance. I think the key to any success in life and in business is passion. If you love what you do, you will be great at what you do. You won't mind how long it is. You won't mind how hard it is, and because it's the journey and the process that you embrace. And I think with those tools in place and with those ideas in place, we can climb to summits. We can elevate ourselves together. And you as well can climb to the top of your own Annapurna. Thank you very much.
Wow, such an incredible story. Thank you so much, Ed, for sharing absolutely amazing experiences. Such a true testament to the dedication and the perseverance that it really takes to succeed. I also want to thank all of our other speakers as well for joining us and inspiring us today. We have talked about deliverability. We've talked about innovation. We've heard how the Everest platform can elevate your email marketing program through its pre-send prep, its in-flight optimization, and also its post-send monitoring. If you would like to learn more about Everest and all the amazing things it can do for your email program, please be sure to visit us at validity.com/Everest. Again, thank you for joining us, everyone, and have a great day.